Welcome to Real Estate Coaching Radio, starring award-winning real estate coaches and #1 international best-selling authors, Tim and Julie Harris. This is the #1 daily radio show for realtors looking for a no BS, authentic, real-time coaching experience. What's really working in today's market, how to generate more leads, make more money, and have more time for what you love in your life. And now your hosts, Tim and Julie Harris.
Welcome back. Today's topic is Master the Talk. Real estate success starts here. So, Julie, what is this content for us, please?
Yes, we're talking about how to properly speak with your clients so that you are getting through to them and it results in setting more appointments, getting more contracts signed, and not struggling with the back and forth.
So let me share with them where we got motivation to write this podcast. So our daughter, Zoe.
Yes.
Right? It's if you guys have had kids before, Julie and I have not raised any children before, and Zoe's our first one. And I guess 11-year-olds, right? They're half kid and half, preteen or all these other things. Well, she's having some issues where she's not necessarily communicating with her friends at a very high level. And one of the books that Julie and I have ordered for Zoe, and we're going to listen to it, is you guys will love this, by the way, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And there's an edition of it for children. So I promised Zoe, because she went to a birthday party and she felt rejected from some of these girls at this birthday party. We asked her what happened, and she had described what happened, and she was interpreting their rejection as they were interpreting normal kid behavior as rejection. And so she doesn't have any siblings. And so, essentially knowing how to communicate competitively and how to get your emotions and your feelings understood without being overly dominant is something that she has to learn. Because when you have siblings, you will learn very quickly what you can and can't get away with. And so we're going to get her that book. Now, what's fascinating is Julie and I were having this conversation with Zoe last night and decided to get her that book. And after she went to bed, we kept talking about the fact that this is the very type of problem. These problems that she's having are some of the same problems that adults have, that because they've never actually had parents that listen to them to help them resolve the problems when they were 11. True. And they never actually learned how to communicate effectively. So that's what we're going to be doing. But this is 5 quick points. Some of these, I think, will help you guys to, I think, recenter yourselves if you might find yourself not necessarily being heard the way you want to be heard. And also great information for you to pass along to anyone that you care about in your life. So brokers, that would be great for your agents, obviously teams, children, if you have children you want to share this information with. I just got word from Instagram that a pastor, did I tell you this?
No.
A pastor in a Baptist church has been using our content.
Really?
Yeah, as part of his presentation. Wow. Yeah. Isn't that great?
That's fun.
Yeah. So in any event, yes, use this information however your heart's to whatever your heart desires, and you can get all of our outlines. The only place they live are available over on harrisrealestatedaily.com, and as our free newsletter, just go to harrisrealestatedaily.com and opt in. And then remember, you've got to pop over to your email, and you've got to click to confirm that you want the newsletter, or you will not be receiving it. So do that right away.
Yes, and communication does touch all aspects of our lives, whether we're talking about Zoe, we're talking about kids, whether that's in business, whether that's your family, whether you're talking to past clients. So these points really can help you everywhere.
Julie, haven't you had coaching clients before? I know I have. I can remember a few off the top of my head. Especially when you and I were full-time coaching, when we had like 60 to 70 coaching calls a week each. Okay. I remember there were some people, and I remember one guy, his name was Paul. Okay.
Yes.
You didn't know him. So this was a guy that had been always working in the back office someplace, retired, wanted to get into real estate. And he was a really nice, likable, caring, sweet guy. And then I met him at a live event, and I saw him. He was about as awkward could possibly be. And I realized, obviously, he was having a lot of, social issues because he didn't know how to communicate. He didn't know how to actually, let people know that he wasn't a serial killer, basically. Yeah. So I gave him some, Julie and I taught him Ford, and we taught him some other things. And then I would send him on his way. And I remember we were at a break, and I told him to essentially go and find a couple people that did know and strike up conversations. And he did. And I watched him actually, his body language, I watched as the facial expression left, he lost some of the tension, and he actually made a friend. And it was all because he did not know how to communicate with people because he was too much in his head. But here's the reason I'm mentioning this. Because that guy was probably in his late 50s and early 60s, and he had the same issues and challenges that our 11-year-old daughter has, right? It's the same exact things that Paul was struggling with, Zoe at 11 is struggling with, and you might be as well.
It's kind of like communication awkwardness in a sense.
Yeah, and you figure out hacks for it. Or Zoe said yesterday, which really broke my heart, she said, well, they just don't like me. Or, she was starting to basically doubt herself. She thought because she's not, like, they weren't running up to her and giving her big hugs like when she was 3, that she thought somehow they had just written her off as a human and that was going to be the end of it. Her social world was over. But again, it's just because she does not know how to communicate with them. And as people grow older, if they don't move past that, they start to have those beliefs about themselves, like what Zoe said to us. Those things they start to actually manifest and make into a reality. So we're going to head that off of the past for Zoe, and hopefully I did that for Paul all those years ago.
Yeah, and that can happen in real estate with just one or two little rejections from maybe a past client that didn't call you back and you perceived it that they didn't like you, and now what happens? All of a sudden you don't feel like talking to anybody.
Well, exactly.
So,
or you might get a real estate license, but because you don't actually, a lot of this, what you guys are going to hear when we go through these points. Julie, let's get to point number one.
Point number one.
Listen to understand, not just to respond.
Yes, and this especially applies when you're learning scripts because you're so anxious to use them. So concentrate on deep diving into their needs. Be fascinated by the person that you're talking to. Use, of course, buyer and seller pre-qualification scripts. You get those in Premier Coaching. Those are designed to uncover your client's desires and keep the focus off of yourself. You can think of yourself as a detective piecing together clues to get the full picture of your clients. Listen attentively and take detailed notes of their responses.
And the main thing here is do not talk about yourself.
Right.
Everyone's favorite topic is themselves. Everybody on planet Earth wants to talk about themselves, not even their kids. They want to talk about them. And if you show sincere interest in them, now you're going to have to, in some cases, figure out how to muster sincere interest in what they're talking about when they're describing themselves. And we teach you how to do that in Premier Coaching, family, occupation, recreation, dreams, the Ford script and things like that. But also to keep yourself from reverting to the mean of talking about yourself. When they say something, say, that's interesting. Tell me more about that.
Yes.
Or if they tell you a story that's kind of long-winded, and if there was one key element of the story that they mentioned, when I was growing up in Missouri, there always used to be this lake. And there was this, all these things. You can go back and refer to something that they'd said towards the beginning of their story and ask more of a drill down question about what they said. There was this old fishing boat, and this is something my dad and I used to work on. It was made of mahogany, and then they start talking about something else, and then you can go back and say, "I'm curious. You mentioned the mahogany boat. Whatever happened to that boat? Or are you still woodworking?" and things like that. And the fact that you ask them questions about something that they just said is going to make it so that they absolutely adore you and they don't even know why, because you're not only showing sincere interest in them, you're actually listening to them and showing follow-up interest. When was the last time anybody did that with you?
Exactly.
If you really want to make yourself stand out in the world, that's the key right there. Shut up. Stop talking about yourself. You do in social settings have to give a little cursory information about yourself, but go right back to giving them the opportunity to express themselves and talk about themselves. If you don't get anything else from today's podcast, that right there is the ultimate really takeaway.
Yes. Okay. Now, related to that, thank you for sharing that because that's absolutely true. Interview both partners. Remember, here is our point. Listen to understand, not just to respond, but interview both partners. When you're working with a couple, interview each of them. And if they're there together, I see this is a mistake. I've seen that happen in many different instances where the assumption is that because maybe the husband has a stronger personality, that you should present just to him. And yet it's really the wife's decision about the house. And if you don't talk to her, she feels like you're not paying attention. So ask questions of both spouses.
But the same goes true too. They're in a very traditional,
it can go the other way. Yes.
If they're in a very traditional relationship, the woman in their traditional relationship, the man is supposed to present as being more dominant, and you are say more on the, I don't even know what word would be, but you take that, that somehow is an offense to you, that there's a dominant matriarchy or all patriarchy, all these words, right? And you then start leaning into asking the wife questions, but in her marriage, she chooses to be in a position where maybe she has a traditional, religious base. Who knows? You don't know. But you then, because of your bringing in your beliefs, because you don't think that's the way things are supposed to be, in the sales opportunity, you start basically giving all these questions and essentially putting more focus on the wife. And you might do that. You're not doing that to be disrespectful. I mean, Julie and I have had similar things happen both ways. Julie and I present, when we're out socially, we're very, neutral. We're like we don't necessarily, one doesn't try to dominate the other. But I can remember on very distinct, I'll just tell you what I was thinking of. I was dancing around this, but Julie and I had a lot of Jewish clients when we were selling real estate. And some of them were very traditional Jewish families. And very traditional Jewish families, the man is always going to be, generally speaking, going to be the more dominant one in the relationship. But if you go there not realizing that, and you are essentially asking the wife all these questions, you're going to make her very uncomfortable. She's actually not going to like it, and you're not being sensitive to the nature of their relationship. I mean, am I expressing this?
You are. You've got to, I think what we're getting around to is you've got to really read your audience and see how they're responding to each other as well as how they're responding to you.
Right.
And so I think that on one level, I would say don't ignore the other spouse, whether it's the man or the woman, but also don't put your outlook on them, because they might be perfectly fine how they're presenting to you. So, this comes with experience, certainly.
Well, if you're like a lady and you're in a house and you're presenting to a traditional couple like what we're describing, and you're not being sensitive to, and you're not traditional, let's say, you're more of I don't even know what the word,
maybe you're like a single, independent, maybe even divorced woman, and you're used to being your own most dominant self.
There you go. Okay, so Julie just described it for me. And you're not sensitive to the environment that you're in, they won't list with you, not because you wouldn't have done a great job for them, but because they felt disrespected.
Would say, in their words, they would say, we just didn't hit it off.
Right. And guess what? It's not the man that felt disrespected. It was the woman who felt disrespected. True. That you didn't respect the environment of her home and how it actually it works in the relationship.
That's right. It's called versatility, people.
Yes.
That's right. Okay. Speaking of which, number 2, clarify their communication preferences. Maybe you just love texting all day long. It's all you do. But maybe that's not their jam. So understand their preferred method. Determine whether your clients prefer texting, emailing, meeting in person, or phone calls. If texting, clarify the platform, WhatsApp, Messenger, SMS. A lot of messages get lost because you're just not using the same platform. It's like setting up a communication GPS to guide you through the process. So make sure you know how they prefer to be communicated with.
And you got to ask them. And just because they texted you at first, that might not be how they prefer to be communicated with.
And you're going to set those clear rules up. You're going to say, tell me how you prefer to be communicated with. Well, I really like being texted. How do you text? Do you use WhatsApp? What do you do? Well, and then you agree to it.
And go even a step further. If you might want to set up a group text with those, that couple you're working with, right? Or you maybe want to set up a group, WhatsApp group. It doesn't really matter, but you guys get the point. That way you can save all the communication in one place and everyone knows where to go, and people aren't dancing around. You're not worrying about messages getting lost.
Now, that said, don't negotiate over text.
No.
Once you're actually going back and forth, you want to have another conversation saying, I know we've been texting a lot, but I have a policy that we don't negotiate in text. So we're going to send over that counteroffer. Then I'm going to call and talk to you. Something like that, so that you're clear of.
That's actually become, interestingly enough, that's become a sales tool to win a client. If you explain to them straight up that at the most important pivot points in the transaction that you're going to talk or meet in person, because there is a certain level of, I would say, nonchalantness or disrespect that happens when you're doing something when you're in the process of negotiating on something that's giving that client stress, and yet you're not willing to meet with them in person, and you're not willing to actually pick up the phone, where you're trying to do everything in text, and they're under a lot of stress, and they're feeling like you're not being sensitive to the fact that they're you guys get it? So you got to think, if you're going to really be somebody who's going to be in this business for a long period of time, your ultimate mission is to be a problem solver. And sometimes the problems that you need to solve are the problems that you bring to the relationship with that client, because you're trying to get the world to be like you. Everyone's going to communicate with me through text. This is how I work. These are my rules. Well, you're going to end up with no one wanting to do business with you.
That's right. You can't be so strict. You should have filters, but don't die on the cross over it.
No.
Okay, so you said something that led right into this. Point number 3, be the solution, not the problem. Now, we have sub-points here: minimizing the stress, communicating frequently, and staying ahead. So minimize the stress. Real estate transactions are by nature stressful, even for experienced clients. So show compassion without being overwhelmed by their emotions. Think of yourself as a real estate superhero swooping in to save the day. Be part of the solution. and communicate frequently. You can't over communicate, but you should try to.
When you take listings and you're a Premier Coaching client, one of the things we're going to teach you guys how to use is something called a communication guarantee. By the way, the communication guarantee is included with Premier Coaching, now with Ethical Real Estate Professional, with the pre-listing packs and all this, because, at the end of the day, the pre-listing pack, especially when you're going after listings, will earn you the listing. The pre-listing pack that we give you as far as Premier Coaching and Ethical Real Estate Professional is like your silent salesperson. If you don't know what I'm talking about, guys, you're missing out. So here's one of the elements of the pre-listing pack is a communications guarantee. And why do you give a communications guarantee? Because if the seller or the buyer, for that matter, has transacted before, chances are, even if they liked their agent, the number one complaint they had with that agent was really piss poor communication. And you can say, and this isn't the exact script, but this is how you present the communications guarantee to the seller. Mr. Seller, it might not surprise you that the number one complaint that folks have after they've worked with a real estate agent, even if they like that real estate agent, and this is according to National Association of Realtors, is the client wishes the agent would have done a better job communicating. So that's the reason I have the communications guarantee, because I know that's the number one complaint that folks have, and that might be the number one concern that you have. You hire someone and then you never hear from them again, or you're not hearing from them in the manner or the frequency in which, or maybe they're even too frequent, right? Mm-hmm. They're not communicating with you, Mr. Seller, the way you want to be communicated with, or buyer, obviously. So I have the communications guarantee, and here's how it works. And it's actually a form where they're going to decide how they want to be communicated with. They're going to say, I want you to email me a summary of showing activity, feedback deck, whatever it is. And it's all in a forum. You just check a box and, I want the information once a week, or I want to be communicated with you only when the house sells. I want to be communicated with you, and you can even go as far as to say, I want you to contact me, not your assistant. You have to give the seller the control. Here's what you'll discover. The seller, generally speaking, isn't going to be too demanding of you communicating with them. They just want to see that you have a guarantee and you have a plan, and then you sign it and they sign it, and then they get a copy of the communications guarantee. That seems like a simple idea that everyone should be doing. Why did we create it? Because we heard sellers constantly, especially expired ones, complaining about the lack of communication they had from their previous listing agent, thus the communication guarantee, thus eliminating a concern that prospective client of yours has, even without verbalizing it. And when you start eliminating concerns that they have, even ones that they haven't actually told you about but they're feeling, you instantly have an unfair advantage in the marketplace because you're trying to problem solve at a level that your competition hasn't even conceived.
It's called a unique selling proposition, isn't it?
Yep.
What makes you different. And sellers will literally say that, well, I never heard from my agent before. That's why they didn't relist with their agent, right? Or why it expired with their agent.
Or they'll say, I only heard it's a 90-day listing or a 6-month listing. I never heard from my agent after. I only heard from my agent, this is the typical thing, when they wanted a price reduction.
Oh, we hear that all the time.
Well, we used to hear it all the time, but I mean, when we
but I hear it from coaching clients that take expireds. The only time I heard from them was when they wanted a price reduction, and they didn't get a price reduction because it was the only time they heard from them.
And guess what? The seller didn't want to give them a price reduction because they were pissed off at that listing agent because they were doing such a shitty job communicating. And even if it was in the best interest of the seller to give that listing agent a price reduction, they won't do it out of spite.
No, it just pisses them off.
I know that sounds wackadoo, but that is unfortunately or fortunately how folks think. So when you come to taking listings, you got to remember communications guarantee, get it signed, use our pre-listing pack.
Yes,
remember, guys, all of this and a ton more is available to you in Premier Coaching. So join Premier Coaching now. You can join for free. Premier Coaching is our premier coaching program. In other words, it's a coaching program that we've designed no matter where you are in the real estate, where you are in your career, whether you're a new agent, you're a seasoned veteran agent selling luxury homes, or selling double wides in the middle of nowhere. Premier Coaching has got an answer for you. It's all about lead generation, pre-qualifying, presenting, negotiating, closing. It's all about building a real estate team, marketing and branding if you choose to go down that path. Everything is part of Premier Coaching, and included is a daily semi-private coaching call. So make sure you are joining Premier Coaching, and you can join now for free. Just go to premiercoaching.com or click the link below to join now.
All right, point number 4, be a problem solver when things go sideways. Not that ever happens in real estate, but let's just say. So report with solutions. Never just deliver bad news. Always follow up with 3 possible solutions. Think about it before you make that call or that in-person meeting.
So give an example. That's a really good point, Julie.
Okay, so let's say that you found out that something really scary happened in the home brochure. I'm sorry, not the brochure, in the home inspection.
Home inspection.
Okay. And, you're nervous about telling them that. something catastrophic with the furnace or, really radical, instead of saying, hey, the home inspection came back, it looks like there's a really big problem with the furnace. That's going to cost a lot of money. Let's talk about that. You're going to say, this happens quite frequently with HVAC systems. I've seen it before. A client last week had to take care of this. I've got estimates for theirs. It's probably only going to cost you this. Or maybe we use the home warranty.
So solution 1 is you replace the furnace. Solution 2 is reduce the price. Solution 3 is...
We can try the warranty.
Because we can try the warranty, and then maybe because the home inspector said the furnace has got another 5 years left on it or 3 years left on it, maybe, and the new furnace will cost $6,000 or whatever, maybe we just try to split the cost between the buyer and the seller. Let's come up with it. And here's what I will suggest after talking with the buyer's agent. But if you just basically drop a bomb on their life,
you're going to have to replace that furnace.
And they don't know how to emotionally deal with it because they're not in the real estate business. So you have to give them, essentially various solutions. And the reason you want to give them various choices opposed to telling them what to do is because they want to be in control. They want to at least feel like they're in control. Now, you can steer them to whatever solution you know is the best fit for them if they're not thinking clearly because they're too emotional. I mean, maybe it's a slate roof on some mansion that's going to cost literally $1 million to replace, right? And oh, by the way, you can't just put slate up. Now you have to put fire retardant slate and all these things. Now the roof's going to cost $2 million. Well, that could be a pretty significant deal killer, don't you think? So you're going to have to do some homework on that and think through what the solution is.
Before you call them.
Before you call them.
That's right. And you can't be emotional. Agents get into it with each other and with their clients because they take it too far. You've got to be factual and you've got to be a problem solver, right? So be the leader in that transaction.
It is worth noting that in most cases, when you're negotiating, just to stick on Julie's example, and there's some ornery home inspection issue, almost always, unless it's some little silly, tiny, trivial thing, almost always the seller is going to be willing to reduce the price by the amount that the repair will cost. But usually they'll want to not be like if the new whatever it is $100,000. Let's say, for example, the pool needs reglazed and new pool equipment and all this type of thing. And let's say it's like $50,000. What the seller will most likely do is they'll say, I'll agree to lower the price by $35,000 not to have to mess around with it. In most cases, the buyers will happily take it because then they get to decide what the work is going to be.
They get the control.
They get the control.
Yeah, and by the way, most of the time your sellers already know that all that stuff is
exactly.
wrong.
That's the funny part. Like even if
Don't
they
kid yourself.
even if they didn't put it in the home inspection, it's like, yeah, damn well they knew that pool equipment didn't work because they've been living in there for 20 years and hadn't used the pool for 19 of them.
Exactly. Okay, now last one is kind of interesting. Watch your language. Words matter. As a general rule, don't use swear words. Even if your client swears like a sailor, maintain your professionalism. Remember, you're the classy captain of the ship. Okay, use logical language. In stressful situations, use logical rather than emotional language. Be the Mr. Spock of real estate. But be factual. Avoid speculation words. This is a little kind of a scripting thing. Don't use words like guess, suppose, or maybe. Be clear. Promise to follow up once you have more precise information, but don't look like you're guessing.
So Julie was touching, and she said it twice, the whole show emotion without being emotional thing. So how do you do that? Let's say you're dealing with a seller that does have a lot of stress. I'll give you my example, okay? This is a lesson Julie and I learned almost our first year in the business. We took a listing. It was a listing that had been previously listed once or twice. The seller had to sell the property. And if I remember correctly, a whole bunch of, we didn't sell it to her, but how much did she lose on that? 80 grand, 100 grand?
Which house are we talking about?
I don't want to say her. I won't say her.
Oh, was it in West Beachwold?
No, her first name was Hazel.
Oh, okay. I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was losing about 80 grand, I think.
Yeah, okay. And this was and she lost her job, so she was fired. She had moved here, moved to, it was Dublin, Ohio, and all these things. So she had all these really, really horrible dominoes that started to fall at the same time.
Stressful.
And she was the sweetest lady ever. And she overpaid for the property. She didn't have enough time to stay there for the house to increase in value to make, you guys get the whole scenario. And she didn't have a job. And now she had to literally come up with like $80,000 or take $80,000 less. I think actually she had to come up with a big chunk of money too, just to get rid of the house.
Yeah. That's
okay.
Right.
All right. So she was crying. She was mad. She was just all the things. And I remember going to our broker, Rory Averill, and I said, Rory, this is eating me alive because this lady's really nice and she's dealing with all the stress. I don't know what to do. And he gave us some of the best advice I'm about to give to you guys. Show emotion without being emotional.
Yep.
Show emotion without being emotional. Rory, what the hell does that mean? And he said, he scripted me. He said, this is what you say. Listen, I hate that this is happening to you. And I did, but I didn't know how to show emotion without being emotional. I hate the fact that you're experiencing this. I'm so sad you're going through this right now. And then you have to say, but let's focus forward. How are you going to feel when this house is sold? How are you going to feel when you're back? I think she was from New York. Mm-hmm. When you're back in New York again, or California or something. How are you going to feel when this is in your rear view and you're, off to the next phase of your life? Things like that. Let's get this problem solved so we can, be thinking about what's next for you guys. Because I'm really excited about the house that you're talking about moving to in Boston, or whatever it is that they're going to say. But you've got to show emotion and tell them how you actually feel. Hopefully you do feel some empathy for them. But the key is, do not go down to the emotional mosh pit with them, because you'll be burning your own candle at both ends.
Yep.
And then you'll get burned out. And then you won't have any emotions left for your family, let alone yourself. And you're going to wonder why real estate's so taxing and stressful. It's because you have to have an arm's length relationship with every single one of your clients, even your friends and your family, because they're hiring you to be a professional. Imagine going to a doctor, or like going to a vet. You have to get your monkey Matt. What would be a better name for a monkey? Matt's not that funny. Mickey the monkey. There you go. That's good. Okay, Mickey the monkey has got a bunch of problems. And, he's a little mangy, and he's got one of his eyeballs.
He's got mats in his monkey fur.
Exactly. He's got one of his, eyeballs looks like it's ready to pop out the whole thing. I mean, do you want, and you love this monkey. I mean, you've raised old Mickey since he was a mutt. Okay. So you and Mickey, you're a bonded pair, you two are. And so the vet, he knows you guys love each other, and you're at the vet, and the vet's like, oh, I'm so sad. This is happening. This is awful. Oh my gosh, how are you and Mickey gonna? You guys get it? No, the vet's gonna say, he's gonna show emotion. He's gonna say what a vet's gonna say. Listen, I really appreciate, Mickey's a great monkey, and I think we can, help him along the way and make it so that he's no longer mangy, and we can get that eye stuck back in his head, and whatever he's going to say. And then he's going to say what the various solutions are. So you have two choices. We can do this, or we can do this, or maybe there's three choices. But can you imagine if the vet you're going to for advice was being all emotional, or even making it so that I know what to do, I'm going to solve this problem, make him seem like he was going to be like, he was adding emotion to it. Oh my gosh, I can't believe he was.
I've never seen this before.
Exactly. Oh, I need to go to ChatGPT and find out why Mickey's eyeball's falling out. I mean, he's going to elevate the emotions and make you feel even worse. All these things are what inexperienced communicators do, salespeople in particular. Yep. So your job is to show emotion without being emotional, and script yourself. Give yourself a break.
One else that I noticed that you would do when you were delivering maybe stressful news, but trying to show emotion without being emotional, is you would say, may I give you the same advice I would my own brother or sister?
Yeah.
And then you'd be quiet, and they'd always get quiet, because now they're like really taking you seriously that you said that. And then you were kind of like on the same plane with them. You're resonating on a different level.
Well, thank you for saying that. And the other thing I would say, and I said this to coaching clients, is, Julie, do I have permission to say something to you that you might find a little bit shocking, if not a little scary?
And they'll always be like, oh, okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Those types of things. And so, and we teach you guys to do all this in Premier Coaching, but really, hopefully you're realizing that success long-term in real estate, in life, by the way, doesn't necessarily come from, it isn't, the marketing, the branding, and all the shortcut things will not solve the big problem. Remember, I started out by telling you guys about Paul, and I started out by telling you about Zoe. So Paul did not learn some of these things when he was younger. Paul maybe was his parents and all of his siblings were all, all of his friends were all very analytical and probably not very, probably not very demonstrative. And so he never really learned how to bond with other people. Oh, who knows, right? And that's a natural part of growing up. You need to learn how to communicate. Well, some of us have skipped some steps. Some of us, when we skipped steps, no one really pointed out to us, except we found ourselves without having social interaction, without having friends, without having, the connectiveness that we would have preferred to have. And maybe in the back of our minds, we've just carried around for our entire lives that there's something wrong with me. People just don't like me or something. That's what Zoe, our little 11-year-old, indicated to us that she's starting to allow to manifest in her little pretty head. And so Julie and I are going to do something about it. And hopefully you guys are going to do something about it yourselves. And, it is a great book to read. There, How to Win Friends and Influence People. That's a great book that's been around forever.
Dale Carnegie, right? And
Yeah,
I think
Dale
there's
Carnegie.
a great audiobook that goes with that too. For
Yeah,
adults
there
anyway.
is. But I think he wrote that in the 60s.
Yeah, very cool. I'm looking forward to that.
And you listen to the original one on audiobook, he's actually reading it.
Yeah.
And it's so funny, like when you listen to Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, where he's actually reading it, and you listen to all the different parlance and all the
It is different.
all the different ways they used to speak back then. It makes the book more special.
It does. And I have to say that there's been several instances. I have had coaching clients tell me, even this happened once last week on a call, that after COVID, they've been reflecting and they said, during COVID, I was in lockdown. This is mostly clients in big cities that I hear this from. We were on lockdown. I went home office. I've never been home office before. And I feel like I never bounced back from that, communication-wise. Okay. And I thought, isn't that interesting? We're sensitive to that with like kids that missed a lot of school because of that. But it's also affected adults in their communication. I think that's one thing. The other thing is that people are so used to little snippets texting back and forth and social media little sentences that are so short that this communication thing, I think, even though it's not a sexy topic per se, I think it's so important
But
because
scale
we're
it up.
affected.
Jill,
Yeah.
scale it up, okay?
Yeah.
So in a world where everyone basically can put on airs of being an influencer,
Right.
where everyone looks amazing because of filters on all the different pictures,
Sure.
where everyone's creating AI videos that are amazing, where everyone's the mayor of their town, where everyone's essentially presenting themselves and this big sort of narcissistic plane of existence, right? Where it's, look at me, I'm amazing, I'm already successful, and everyone's thinking that's what they're supposed to do. And then, of course, when a prospective client then reaches out to that person who has this big puffed up, I think, image of themselves, then you communicate with them and they realize that the person's really just a mediocre communicator. No one says this person's a mediocre communicator. What they say or what they think is that was not a very pleasant experience talking with Bob. Or Bob only wanted to send me a text. Or Bob only messaged me back through Instagram. Or when Bob talked to me, he didn't ask me questions. He just was like these weird little, idiosyncrasies, these little, features and
They could be misperceptions too.
Exactly.
I mean, I'm sure that Bob didn't mean to sound that way.
So the thing that ultimately is going to differentiate you in the marketplace is your ability to communicate, your ability to make people feel heard. If this does not resonate with you because you want to be heard, because you want people to pay attention to you, because you want to be, attention grabbing, that's something that probably you should have worked through when you were a lot younger. Because you've got to realize that your highest and truest purpose on this planet isn't to make you the center of even your own universe. It's to be of service to other people. That is where you're going to find your highest level of purpose, meaning, and happiness, is when you're focused on how can I be of service to other people. And this all starts with earning the right to be of service to them. And the way you prove that you're someone that they want to be attached to as a real estate professional is your communication. And knowing how to talk and how to speak, knowing how to ask questions, knowing how to listen, knowing how to respond, knowing when not to say something, knowing when not to respond. All of these things are a learned skill. And trust me when I tell you, every single one of us can always be better at it. So always, always be focused on what's going to differentiate you in the marketplace. And it's not more marketing and branding. It's not more bus benches. It's not more, moving truck. It's not more, look at me, I'm so amazing pictures on Instagram. It's going to be the experience that people have with you when they're one-on-one with you, when they're talking with you, when they meet with you. What's the impression that they had of you? Because one impression, they run into you at Starbucks and you're a shitheel. All your marketing, all your branding goes out the window because it turns out you're not that pleasant.
Well, you said the most important thing to summarize, and then we'll be done with today's pod.
It wasn't shitheel, was it?
No, it wasn't that. You said, lead with how can you be of service? How can you help somebody? So if you're nervous doing your lead follow-up, you're nervous to hold an open house, you're nervous to present some terrible thing in a home inspection, you're dealing with some contentious agent on the other side, or you're dealing with a really super stressed out kind of obnoxious seller, just lead with being of service. How can you help them? That gets your ego out of the way and it helps you communicate on a higher level. Instead of worrying about all this other stuff, how can you help them, especially voice to voice or face to face?
Well, I mean, this is something, again, you and I can meander about, ramble about this forever. But if you're not feeling love, you need to give love to other people. If you're not feeling respect, you need to give respect to other people. If you're not feeling recognition, you need to give recognition to other people. Whatever you're feeling that you need, I don't like the word ego because it's,
Sure.
it's made up, but whatever you're feeling like you're lacking, I'm not going to show this person love because they're not showing me love. How's that working out for you? If you're not experiencing in life what you want to be experiencing with your interaction with other people, you need to lead with that. If, for example, you're finding yourself in, let's say, I had an interaction recently with someone in our EXP Realty group. And this person in the EXP Realty group is trying to essentially go to the next level spiritually, which, that's not my forte necessarily. They knew we were Christians, but that wasn't what I was there to talk to them about. But they wanted to go through, they wanted to move away from sort of this narcissistic branding marketing thing that the whole world's about. They wanted to learn how to be better communicators. They didn't present like this, but that's in essence what they were saying. And yet they were part of this, this team that they felt really attached to. Half of the team was their family members. And they said, I want to learn how to pre-qualify. I'm tired of doing the videos and all these other things because it doesn't generate any leads. And yet they were listing the whole team, and especially I think it was the mom and somebody else. They were so addicted to this real estate coach who's basically just a grifter. He's never even sold real estate before, who basically spends all of his time teaching agents how to do social media marketing. That's what he does. And this agent was smart enough, listens to our podcast and said, this is clearly malarkey. And by the way, this agent was in their 20s. I grew up with this stuff. I see it for what it is. I know it's not necessarily going to get me where I want to be as far as being a real estate professional. What should I do? And they were prepared to go and leave the family team and, become essentially go and try to right the wrongs of these people's thinking and just do all this confrontational stuff. I said, nope, don't do any of that. Here's what you do. You need to become the best version of yourself as a caring, competent, skilled real estate practitioner, where you're learning how to communicate, where you're learning how to problem solve for other people, where you're becoming the best version of yourself, the most caring, competent version of yourself as a real estate professional, and they will follow you because they'll see that you're being successful. And that's what happens in life. If you right now are, just to make it religious, if you are somebody who's trying to reconnect or connect with God at a higher level, and you're finding that you're around a bunch of people that maybe even call themselves Christians, but they don't live a very Christian life, and you're want to stay connected with them because you love them, they're your friends, what are you supposed to do? Well, I'll tell you what you're supposed to do. You essentially go on your own path, and you'll be shocked how quickly they'll follow you. They'll do what you're doing. They'll say they'll stop doing the things that are against their stated religion, and the things they listen to, and the alcohol and all these other sort of things, right?
Because they'll be following you as the leader.
Exactly.
You're setting the example.
Right. And so just making this very practical, when Julie and I started selling real estate, we were very successful. Sold over 100 houses our first year, made hundreds of thousands of dollars our first year. And this is when we were basically in our early 20s. And we were more or less overtly and covertly rejected by virtually everyone, that even family members, because we'd broken the mold. We weren't braggadocious. We weren't putting it in their faces. We weren't saying, blah, 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 look at us. None of that thing. None of that was what we were doing. But we all of a sudden were not going. Julie was, and her parents, mine was maybe slated to become a school teacher. And now clearly she wasn't going to be a school teacher. And so she broken the mold. We'd broken the mold, right? That was what happened. And some of these people dropped us like a hot coal. And we didn't hear from them for a long period of time. And, some of them we'd known, friends and whatnot. So what happened was we stayed the course. We kept on working and producing, selling more, improving ourselves, and just doing all the things. And almost every single one of them re-entered our lives, said they'd been watching from the sidelines, without us knowing, had used us as motivation for them to improve their lives. We didn't go after them and say, well, you need to get into real estate, or, you need to lose weight, or you need to start doing this different or this different, right? But they followed us because they were watching that we were becoming more successful. So without us knowing, and a lot of our success comes without us intending to influence other people, by the way, but without us intending to influence other people, we were influencing other people. They were watching. They started then improving their own lives. And some of them came back, in some cases, a decade or more later, and thanked us for the fact that we indirectly acted as I think, something that helped them to realize that they could get more out of life than what maybe they thought they were preordained to experience. Does that make sense?
That's right, because you're setting the example without being like, hey, you need to do this. You put your own oxygen mask on first, of course.
But this is a mindset. You guys see how this all circles around being of service to other people?
Exactly.
This is all about communication. This is all about, like, where's your mind focused? Is your mind focused on look at me? Is your mind focused on, like, that's the antithesis of good communication. You guys realize that? Do you realize the more attention you try to draw to yourself, the less people find you attractive? Isn't that interesting? It's true. Because you're in the service business. You're a real estate professional. You need to always make it about the other person. And not just when you're transacting, not just because you're trying to win or a buyer or a seller. Do that for everybody in your life. And then, sure enough, you're going to start attracting more and more people to you. Oh, and by the way, the things that you felt like you were lacking, the friendships, the love, the respect, the recognition, it'll start showing up in your life in so many more ways than you could possibly fathom. But that doesn't mean you get to revert to being a narcissistic nut job. You got to stay the course and remind yourself your highest and truest purpose on this planet is to be of service to other people.
Very well said, and that's the pod.
Yes, that's the pod. Have a fantastic day. We'll talk with you on the show tomorrow.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.